today I want us to just talk a little bit about something. So, on 30th June, the High Court of Kenya gave an order that essentially halted the implementation of the Finance Bill 2023. And this is supposed to happen as the matter is pending hearing in court. Now, that being said, the finance bill was still implemented, and I think if you've been keen enough, you've noticed that at midnight, fuel went up 192, 195 different places depending on where you are. So this is part of the implementation of the finance bill. Now, despite the court order being issued, several businesses have already put that into their products and things have gone high. So I just wanted to have a short thing, let's say an explainer, to talk about what the increased VAT on fuel means to you and to me as the common people. So over the past few days, at least, we've had the development in our budget. And one of the things that struck most people was the increase in VAT on fuel and petroleum products from 8% to 16%. That's double the VAT that's chargeable on those products. Now, that might just seem like, okay, they've just increased taxes. But what then does that mean for you? What then does that mean for every Tom, Dick, and Harry in a normal household? First thing, the basic rule of business is that the cost that has been incurred by the manufacturer or the supplier or the importer, whatever cost has been incurred by them, it's transferable to the end user. So that means if I am using petroleum products or whatever to transport my products, to manufacture my products, or anything in that line, then I must factor in that cost in the final cost that goes to you as the end user. And that means prices of goods will go up. So that's just the first effect. So because of that overall or general rule of business, prices of commodities are bound to go up. Let's say, for example, goods that have to be transported from warehouses outside Nairobi into the supermarkets, or even matatu fares. So that means if you're taking a matatu for 100 bob, like from Rongai, for example, it's likely going to be 130 or 150 depending on the matatu or the traffic or whatever, how they decide to charge it. But they have to factor in the fact that they're incurring more cost to buy fuel, and make sure that you pay fare that is commensurate with that. So that's just one thing. And the worst thing is that it falls disproportionately on those in the middle and lower income households, because that means there is then less cash or less money to be used for their basic needs, because most of it goes to compensate for the increased prices for what they already use. The second thing is small businesses, which form a huge part of Kenya's economy, are going to suffer the most. That is because, just looking at the trajectory small businesses have been taking, one of the common ones we've seen is using borders for deliveries and things like that. So now if these prices go up, they'll either have to hike their prices, which might lead to them losing customers, which is not an end result they're aiming for, or them having to incur a lot of expenses out of pocket in terms of spending more on transport or spending more to import their products. Let me give you an example. I run a thrift store. I don't run a thrift store, but I'm saying, let's say I run a thrift store on Instagram. And I use, I don't know which border services do people use on Instagram. I'm not quite sure. There are quite a number. Or let's just say I use a normal rider. And for deliveries in various places, various locations, the price depends on the location for the delivery. So if you are buying a dress worth 300 shillings and the delivery to wherever you go, wherever it's being delivered to, is 200 shillings, it does not then make sense to buy the outfit from me at 300 shillings if you're going to incur transport expenses worth 200 shillings. You'd rather come physically to the shop or find somewhere else where you can buy the dress for 300 shillings or just 500 nearby without incurring cost of transport. So that's also something else. And further, it's going to reduce their profit margins, because one, small businesses already do not have such a huge profit margins like bigger companies or bigger corporations. So reducing their profit margins further than what it is now or how stretched it has been might also affect their businesses negatively. The third thing is the inflation, of course. So we cannot ignore the inflationary pressure that this is bound to put in our economy. Our economy is already strained thus far as it is, and having to put further strain on it by making commodities more expensive and therefore reducing the purchasing power of most households already extends the stretch beyond what we want. And that means a lot of citizens will not be able to afford goods and services that they would ordinarily be able to afford without the increased cost of living. And like I've said, now the last one is increasing cost of living overall. We have the inflationary pressure, we have profit margins for small businesses, we have increased or rather passing of the amount incurred to the end consumer. So ultimately, what all this does is increase the cost of living significantly. As it stands right now, our cost of living is already high, and we've seen mandamanos, we've seen complaints on Twitter and on various social media platforms, and many people are stretched to the core. So having an increase in uh, fuel VAT for fuel and petroleum products just further increases this, because if you look at it, everything we do, everything we buy is somehow tied to fuel and petroleum products, so to speak, because you have to use transport, you have to travel here and there. For those who are importing cars, it's now going to be a little bit more expensive. For those who are transporting their goods from one place to another. And as you know, for example, for those who live in Nairobi, most of the foods that come to Nairobi are not grown in Nairobi. So that means they have to be transported from Nyeri, they have to be transported from Embu, they have to be transported from Kitale or wherever. So those people will have to increase their cost for the food to get here. So food prices are gonna go up. Now, it's highly unlikely that salaries will go high. Taxes go high, inflation goes high, cost of living goes high, but salaries often remain constant. And yes, there's conversation to increase salaries for a certain group of people, but that's a separate band, not you and me. So we are not part of that conversation. So what's next for us? As we have seen, despite the court issuing an order, the taxes have already been imposed. So that means itabidi tumejipanga. So what factors or what measures are we going to use to mitigate the effects, or rather what mitigation strategies are we going to employ? I mean, it's not fair and it's not going to be rosy, but one, people have to learn to live a little below their means. Like within your means right now is quite tricky, because first of all, by the time you're getting your salary, the taxes already, your salary will be like about 49 or 50% of what the total amount is, and the rest having gone to taxes. So we have to learn to cut back. So that is having a very strict budget at home, knowing what is not important, what is a need and what is a want, and just being able to navigate that clearly so that you can be able to know what to cut back on, what is not necessary. And then if for those who have their own homes and things like that, it would be prudent to look at renewable energy sources as opposed to just electricity, because well, we all know KPLC and their monopoly are about to do the thing again. So if you can be able to use alternative means, then kudos. So the question then is whether or not the increased taxes will lead to the expected outcome of one, increasing government revenue by increasing the tax base. I think not. And this is simply explained by something called the Laffer curve, which I don't think I'll explain now, but I'll do a short video explaining what the Laffer curve is and what it essentially means, or how it affects, or what do I say, how it explains the economic model that the Kenya Kwanza government is using. So for now, maybe just let me know how you'll survive with the increased VAT and the increased cost of living. What cost-cutting measures are you going to employ in your home, in your workplace, or just basically in your life, that we all survive this? Bye.